a history of loyal service. Animals have been intertwined with the lives of humans, particularly in warfare, since ancient history. Their unique characteristics often made them superior to early mechanized options. To fully understand their role in the two world wars, it is important to first establish the deep historical roots of military use for both camels and elephants. The camel, ships of the desert. The camel's association with military endeavors spans millennia. The earliest written records of camel cavalries being employed in warfare date back to 853 BC. Camels were also instrumental outside of combat. They served vital functions in transporting people, goods, and freight across vast distances. A prime example of this transport role was their use along the famous Silk Road. This vast Eurasian network of trade routes, active from the 2nd century BCE until the 15th century, stretched approximately 4,000 miles, connecting China and the Far East to Europe and the Middle East. Caravans traveling the Silk Road were impressive in scale. A single caravan could sometimes contain anywhere from 500 to 12,000 camels. For hundreds of years, especially in the harsh deserts of Australia, Africa, and Asia, camels were essentially the only reliable means of transportation. Two types of camels are most commonly recognized: the Bactrian camel, which has 2 humps, and the dromedary camel, which has 1 hump. Bactrian camels were already being ridden sometime before 1200 BC, indicating an early understanding of their potential as mounted animals. Specialized saddles were developed to facilitate their use by riders.
Unique characteristics and military value. The camel's physical makeup grants it several unique characteristics that make it exceptionally valuable in arid or generally challenging environments. These traits cemented their enduring role as military assets in desert regions. Firstly, camels possess remarkable strength and stamina. They are capable of carrying a massive load, roughly 600 pounds, which is equivalent to about 270 kilograms. Furthermore, they can transport this heavy cargo over significant distances, potentially covering more than 60 miles or 95 kilometers in a single day. This capability is sustained by incredible endurance. A camel can walk continuously for 12 hours straight and maintain this effort for over 15 days without needing water. The ability to sustain prolonged travel without refreshment is perhaps their most critical advantage in desert warfare. Secondly, their physical adaptations aid movement. Camels have long legs and thick padded feet. These features allow them to navigate difficult terrain and move easily over loose sand. Thirdly, they are adapted for extreme weather. Camels can voluntarily close their nostrils, which protects them during severe sandstorms. Additionally, they have thick, long eyelashes, which serve as protection for their eyes. They are also biologically engineered to withstand dramatic shifts in body temperature. In the desert, days can be scorching hot while nights become extremely cold. Such temperature fluctuations would typically prove fatal to other animals, but camels endure them well. Finally, their diet is incredibly versatile. Camels can consume nearly all types of plant life. This includes prickly plants like cacti, thanks to their protective, thick, and leathery mouth lining. When a camel finally gets a chance to drink, especially after a long period of thirst, it can consume a staggering amount of water. It is rumored that a thirsty camel can drink more than 20 gallons of water, or 75 liters, in just a couple of minutes.
The evaluations confirmed the camel's utility as pack animals. They excelled in this role. However, the experiment revealed significant practical difficulties for the soldiers handling them. Troops struggled with the camels, noting issues such as the animals agitating horses, spitting, biting, and emitting a strong odor. Despite these challenges, there were positive reviews. Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee, who personally led a small camel caravan in 1860, viewed the camels favorably. He believed they were effective military pack animals, maneuvering successfully within the Southwest's climate and difficult terrain. Some of the camels were subsequently relocated to a U.S. Army post in California. Ultimately, the experiment was cut short by the outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861. A dedicated permanent role for the camels in the U.S. military was never formally established. Furthermore, the war was predominantly fought in the eastern U.S., which possessed a vastly different environment and climate compared to the American West, further limiting the utility of the Camel Corps. The Camels' fate became tangled with the conflict. Confederate troops took control of Camp Verde in February 1861. One specific camel, known as Old Douglas, achieved fame by becoming the mascot of the Civil War's 43rd Mississippi Infantry. After the war, the experiment dissolved. Some camels escaped into the wild. Others were sold off to circuses or to gold prospectors seeking rugged transport. Still others were simply abandoned. Following the conclusion of the Civil War, the government sold the remaining stock. Remarkably, sightings of these escaped camels continued in the American Southwest as late as the 1940s, suggesting that some had successfully acclimated to the environment and managed to survive and breed in the area. The elephant: strength and trainability. Just as the camel defined logistics in the desert, the elephant established itself as a powerful military asset elsewhere. Elephants were first used by humans in India about 4,000 years ago. Their initial utility was in agriculture. However, due to their inherent strength and their capacity for training, elephants were eventually incorporated into military usage. Historical Sanskrit writings indicate that the use of elephants for warfare was established around 1100 BC. Generally, the type of elephant used in battle, either African or Asian, was determined by the geography of the conflict. Capabilities and strategic impact. Elephants served several crucial military functions. They provided essential transportation services. They were also powerful movers of heavy equipment and substantial supplies. In battle, their sheer physical size and capability to charge at high speeds made them terrifying. They often charged while trumpeting and roaring loudly. This tactic effectively created an elephant cavalry. The sight of such a force was often enough to frighten the horses and men of an opposing army, particularly if the enemy had never encountered military elephants before. The most famous historical example of the military use of elephants is the Carthaginian commander Hannibal. His strategic crossing of the Alps in 218 BC, which took place during the Second Punic War against Rome, remains one of the most widely remembered stories involving war elephants. Vulnerabilities of war elephants. Working with war elephants, however, revealed significant vulnerabilities and weaknesses in their application. To be effective, an elephant needed to work closely with its mahout, the person responsible for tending to, training, and riding the animal. Recognizing this dependency, enemy forces often focus their attacks on killing the mahout. If the mahout was eliminated, the elephant was largely rendered useless in battle. Furthermore, elephants had physical weaknesses that could be exploited. The footpad of the elephant is often described as its Achilles heel. When opposing armies placed spike devices or barbed planks in the path of the elephants, the resulting injury could wound the animal severely, leaving it lame and unable to participate further in the fighting. Another frequent target was the elephant's trunk. If the trunk was damaged or attacked, the elephant would lose its ability to lift troops up to ride it, severely limiting its utility. Despite these vulnerabilities, both camels and elephants had established a centuries-long history of indispensable service by the time the major global conflicts of the 20th century erupted. When the First World War began, the need for reliable transport and labor meant these historic military assets would once again be mobilized.
Main analysis practical part: camels and elephants in global conflict. The 20th century brought unprecedented global warfare, starting with the First World War. World War I, also known as the Great War, spanned from July 28, 1914 to November 11, 1918. It involved a global conflict between two primary groups, the Allies, or Entente, and the Central Powers. While characterized by trench warfare, machine guns, artillery, and chemical weapons, the fighting was concentrated mainly in Europe and the Middle East. The principal Allied powers included France, the United Kingdom, the Empire of Japan, the Kingdom of Italy, and the Russian Empire until 1917, with the United States joining the fight starting in 1917. They faced the Central Powers, the Ottoman Empire, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria. 30 global nations declared war and joined one of these two coalitions between 1914 and 1918. In this massive conflict, and later in World War II, camels and elephants proved essential. Camels in World War I, WWI. Prior to the start of WWI, camel cavalry units were already operating across the Middle East. Several powerful nations recognized their value in arid territories. For instance, France formally established a camel corps in 1912. This unit was part of the Armée d'Afrique, and primarily saw action within the vast Sahara Desert region. The British also founded their own unit, the Somaliland Camel Corps, in 1912. Even the Bulgarian military was utilizing camel caravans in 1912 during the First Balkan War. During WWI itself, the British Army relied heavily on camel transport. They created the Egyptian Camel Transport Corps. This unit consisted of camels and their Egyptian drivers and was crucial for moving British supplies through vital areas including Sinai, Palestine, and Syria. The British Indian Army also deployed the Bikaner Camel Corps from British India, which fought alongside the British not only in WWI but also in World War II. A particularly important British formation established in 1916 was the Imperial Camel Corps, ICC. The ICC was tasked with conducting long-range patrols deep within the Sinai Desert and around the critical Suez Canal waterway. This corps was integrated into the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, the EEF, which engaged in battles during the Sinai and Palestine campaign of WWI. The ICC served until it was officially disbanded in 1919. The immense scale of camel use is underscored by the tragic fact that over 100,000 camels are estimated to have died during WWI alone. This immense loss resulted from combat wounds, disease, general neglect, exhaustion, and the relentlessly harsh conditions of the battlefield and long treks. A memorial dedicated to the World War I Imperial Camel Corps was unveiled in 1921 at Victoria Gardens, Thames Embankment, in London, England, recognizing their profound service. Camels were vital for transporting wounded soldiers to medical facilities. For example, photographs from 1916 to 1917 show wounded troops being loaded onto cacolets, one on each side of a camel for transport. The Australian Army Service Corps also utilized to transport camels extensively, as evidenced by photographs taken at Deiran, Israel, between 1914 and 1918. Camels in World War II, WW2. The crucial role of the camel continued into World War II. Several nations' militaries incorporated them into their war efforts, echoing their necessity in World War I. The nations noted for using them included Italy, France, Britain, Russia, Romania, and Bulgaria. Even German forces used camels, both in the North African campaign and less famously on the Eastern Front. British imperial units that relied on camels during World War II included the Arab Legion, the Sudan Defense Force, the Egyptian Camel Corps, the Drule Regiment, organized by the British, and the Indian Bikaner Camel Corps. The French utilized camels effectively as well. The Free French Camel Corps was active in northern Africa. In a notable action in December 1942, this corps successfully repelled the Italian army at the Tunisia-Tripoli border, showcasing their combat efficacy.
The Eastern Front, Kuznechik's story. One of the lesser-known aspects of camel use in World War II involves Germany and Russia on the Eastern Front. In 1942, German Gebirgsjäger, mountain, units were observed riding Bactrian camels in the Kuban sector of the Russian front. The German Wehrmacht deployed a number of these camels in the region south of Rostov, where German forces were pushing toward the strategically critical Caucasus oil fields. However, the most compelling story of a camel on the Eastern Front relates to the Soviet effort during the pivotal Battle of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad raged from July 17, 1942 until February 2, 1943. It is widely recognized as the turning point of World War II in the European theater, resulting in an estimated loss of over 1 million military personnel and civilians. The battle concluded with a decisive Soviet victory, marked by the surrender of the German Sixth Army, the routing of Army Group B, and the decimation of the Fourth Panzer Army. Stalingrad was strategically vital for multiple reasons. It was the largest industrial hub in the Soviet Union. Furthermore, the Volga River passing through the city served as a critical transport hub. Controlling Stalingrad was essential for accessing the Caucasus oil fields. During the lengthy siege, maintaining a constant flow of military, medical, and food supplies into Stalingrad was critical to the eventual Soviet success. This is where a Bactrian camel named Kuznechik, meaning grasshopper, entered the narrative. Kuznechik was instrumental in supporting the Soviet war effort. Kuznechik, originally from Kazakhstan, had been used by the Soviet 308th Rifle Division, which was formed in March 1942 and later became the 120th Guards Rifle Division.
This camel transported essential supplies, including ammunition, food, fuel, and other necessary cargo, and also carried wounded soldiers. The 120th Guards Rifle Division was one of the units dedicated to defending the Barricadi arms factory during the siege of Stalingrad. After the successful defense of Stalingrad, many Soviet military units recognized the effectiveness of these animals and began incorporating camels into their logistics chains. Camels were uniquely suited for the conditions. They could haul heavy loads over long distances and navigate challenging terrain while requiring very little food or water. They proved especially effective in the Russian Kalmyk steppes. This vast open terrain northwest of the Caspian Sea, covering approximately 100,000 square kilometers or 24,710,538 square acres, was difficult for horses and trucks, partly because of primitive roads and a widespread lack of water. Camels provided reliable transportation where motorized vehicles struggled. The final destiny of Kuznechik, the camel hero of Stalingrad, remains uncertain, resting between two distinct accounts. One popular narrative claims that he continued following the Soviet troops all the way to Berlin. In this version, he was led to the Reichstag building and famously spat on it. A contrasting, more tragic story suggests that Kuznechik was killed in 1945 near the Baltic Sea during a German air raid. Reliable statistics on the total number of camels killed or lost during World War II due to harsh conditions, disease, neglect, and exhaustion are currently unavailable. However, based on the scope of the war, the count is feared to potentially match or even exceed the devastating numbers reported for World War I.
Elephants in World War I and World War II. Elephants also saw renewed military service during the global conflicts, often stepping in due to the mass conscription of other animals. During WWI, horses, both military-owned and privately owned, were widely conscripted and sent primarily to the Western Front. Germany used horses extensively on both the Western and Eastern fronts. Horses were also essential in the Middle East and the Balkans. Because military vehicles were not yet produced in large numbers for mass use, there was a high demand and need for animals for various crucial tasks. The subsequent shortage of animals for farm labor, heavy lifting, and various trades created an economic and logistical problem. To compensate for these losses, animals like camels and elephants were recruited, often sourced from circuses and zoos to fill the labor void. Images from WWI show elephants being used to plow fields in England. In 1917, elephants were actively used by the German army in Berlin. The involvement of elephants continued into WWII, particularly in the Far East. Elephants were crucial for loading heavy gasoline drums into military supply planes in India in 1945. In another example, an elephant was photographed pulling a Corsair airplane on an airfield in India during WWII. The Japanese army also utilized elephants in Burma starting in 1942. Their strategic importance was such that the British even camouflaged their Lanchester armored cars in Burma to resemble elephants. In Germany during WWII, two elephants named Mary from Burma and Kiri from Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, were originally brought to the Hamburg Zoo for circus training. They were later mobilized to help clean up the city following heavy Allied bombings. Elephant heroes of WWII, Mackerel and Williams. The logistical use of elephants produced powerful stories of individual heroism and immense human-animal bonding, especially in the challenging environment of the Burma campaigns. Giles Mackerel and the Doffer River Rescue. Giles Mackerel, born in 1888, was a British tea planter and a representative for Octavius Steele and Company, a tea agent in Assam, India. Assam is a northeastern state situated in India, running along the Brahmaputra and Barak river valleys south of the eastern Himalayas. Crucially, Mackerel owned and operated a Burmese elephant transport business. In 1942, the Japanese were advancing rapidly from Burma, now Myanmar, toward India. This advance triggered a massive refugee crisis, with people fleeing ahead of the Japanese forces. On June 4, 1942, Mackerel received an urgent message reporting that refugees were trapped. They were stranded near the Chowkin Pass area and the Doffer River, which was severely swollen by the monsoon rains near the border between Burma and India. Mackerel immediately led his elephants on a grueling trek. They traveled nearly 100 miles, or 160 kilometers, through dense jungle terrain.
The elephants finally arrived at the Dafa River on June 9th. The following day, the river's condition improved slightly. Mackerel used his elephants to successfully rescue 68 members of the Burma Frontier Force and the Burma Rifles who had become stranded on an island in the river. Mackerel then established a camp at the site. He continued his dangerous rescue efforts, primarily focusing on British and Indian soldiers caught in the area. By September 1942, it is estimated that Mackerel and his elephant transport team had rescued approximately 200 people. Images from the time confirm Mackerel's elephants carrying the refugees during this critical rescue operation. The tale of this daring exploit is documented in the book Flight by Elephant, written by Andrew Martin. Mackerel even filmed parts of the rescue, footage of which can be viewed through BBC News. James Howard, Billy Williams, the Elephant Whisperer. James Howard, Billy Williams, born in 1897, became known later in life as Elephant Bill and the Elephant Whisperer. His profound affection for animals was a constant theme throughout his life. Williams served in World War I with the Devonshire Regiment, sometimes called the Bloody 11th. His duties during the war took him across Africa, the Middle East, and Afghanistan. Notably, while in Africa, he served with the Imperial Camel Cup. After World War I ended, Williams secured employment in 1920 as a forester for a tea clogging company in Burma. During his time there, he learned the Burmese language and developed a deep, lifelong passion for elephants. His role involved managing a large fleet of elephants. Through this work, Jim became exceptionally skilled in the medical treatment and care of sick and injured elephants. His knowledge of animal behavior was advanced, and combined with his close interaction with the elephants and his natural affinity for the species, he earned the famous moniker, the Elephant Whisperer. When the Japanese invaded the Far East in Burma in 1942, the initial assumption was that they would not advance past Singapore and Malaya. This assumption proved incorrect. In a protective measure, the Bombay-Burma Corporation decided to evacuate European women and children from Burma to the relative safety of India. Williams, who was married and had 2 children in Burma, accompanied one evacuation party with his family. However, he soon returned to Burma, determined to help the war effort there. Williams joined Force 136, a British intelligence organization. This organization was a specific branch of the British Special Operations Executive. Williams operated behind enemy lines. At its height, his unit, known as the Elephant Company, commanded an enormous force of 1,600 elephants. The work performed by the Elephant Company was varied and vital. The elephants were used to build bridges and carry huge amounts of supplies. They were employed to smuggle weapons past enemy lines. They performed heavy labor by cutting down trees to clear emergency airfields. They were indispensable for transporting people escaping the Japanese across extremely treacherous mountain terrain. They were used for countless other efforts necessary for the war. Williams' success made him a high-value target. At one point, the Japanese military placed a specific bounty or price on his head.
The test of Bandula was a crucial element to Williams' story, and the remarkable elephant named Bandula was born in Burma on November 3, 1897. He was raised by Po Tok, a master mahout. Crucially, Po Tok raised Bandula gently, avoiding the violence that was often associated with the process of taming and raising an elephant. When Williams met Bandula, a profound and unique human-animal bond quickly formed between them. In March 1944, Williams received orders to move his entire elephant contingent out of Burma and into India. This directive was crucial to prevent their capture by the advancing Japanese forces and to keep them safely away from the ongoing, fierce fighting. The wartime actions of Williams' Elephant Company were formally recognized as indispensable to the success of the Allied effort in Burma. Protecting the animals was, therefore, considered vital to the overall strategy. The journey to safety was immense. Williams led the trek, which was a 120-mile, 193-kilometer walk through heavy terrain, thick jungle, and mountainous regions. The caravan also included 64 refugees. It was during this arduous journey that the bond between Jim and Bandula faced its greatest trial. They encountered one of the 5 mountain ranges that they had to cross during their flight from Burma. On the 9th day of travel, the caravan reached the Kaaba Valley. The conventional roads had been cut off. The only remaining route was an ascent up a 270-foot sheer cliff face. This presented a seemingly impossible issue. Climbing is not a natural behavior for an elephant. The cliff itself was composed of porous sandstone.
To proceed, they realized they needed to construct an elephant stairway. Steps were painstakingly created by sawing them directly out of the sandstone. These steps had to be specifically sized to accommodate the large dimensions of an elephant's foot. They also had to cut back the thick vegetation surrounding the cliff. Once preparation was complete, the incredible climb began. Bandula, demonstrating his courage and trust, was the first to lead the way up the newly carved stairway. He was followed by a line of the other elephants. In total, the group consisted of 45 adult elephants and 8 baby elephants. The ascent was slow and perilous. It took each individual elephant 3 hours to successfully climb the stairway. Miraculously, all the elephants made the climb successfully. In April 1944, with the Japanese forces finally retreating, the region was deemed safe enough for the elephants to return to Burma. The elephants returned and immediately resumed their critical work supporting the Allies. Sadly, Bandula's story ended in tragedy. When Williams later returned to the elephant camp, he was unable to locate Bandula. After searching for 5 days, Jim went to Potok's camp. Potok informed him that Bandula was dead. Jim immediately traveled to the meadow where the body was reportedly located. Bandula had been shot in the head. Furthermore, his right ivory tusk had been illegally removed. Williams conducted an investigation that pointed toward Potok as the person responsible for killing Bandula. The murder of his trusted friend haunted Jim Williams for the remainder of his life. Williams ensured that Bandula was given a proper resting place. He was buried on the Burma-India border. Carved onto a giant teak tree at the site are the words commemorating his life and service. Bandula born 1897, killed in action 1944. The full story of Bandula and Jim Williams, the Elephant Whisperer, is explored and recounted in detail in the book Elephant Company by Vicky Constantine Croak. The practical analysis of animal involvement in World War I and World War II reveals several key findings. Camels and elephants were not just incidental components of the military machine, they were strategically vital assets whose unique capabilities directly influenced logistical and operational outcomes in multiple theaters of war.
The results demonstrate that the success of these animals in warfare hinged entirely on their specialized biological traits, which often outperformed contemporary mechanical transport in certain conditions. For the camel, their utility stemmed directly from their extreme adaptation to arid climates. Their capacity to carry 600 pounds, 270 kilograms, over distances of 60 miles per day is remarkable, but their ability to sustain this movement for over 15 days without requiring water is perhaps their single most decisive advantage in the desert. This endurance was irreplaceable in environments like the Sinai Desert, where the British Imperial Camel Corps (ICC) conducted essential long-range patrols around the Suez Canal. Furthermore, the camel's ability to navigate soft sand and rough terrain using its thick, padded feet was crucial. This advantage extended beyond the Middle East into the challenging environment of the Russian Kalmyk steppes. After the Battle of Stalingrad, Soviet forces started heavily relying on camels. The Kalmyk steppes were vast, open, and lacked reliable water or developed roads, making movement difficult for motorized trucks and horses. Camels provided the only reliable way to transport heavy cargo over these great distances with minimal resources, proving essential in the southern theater of the war. Similarly, the elephant's sheer power and trainability ensured its relevance. Their strength allowed them to move heavy equipment and supplies that were impossible for men or smaller animals. In World War I, elephants stepped into labor roles such as plowing fields and cleaning cities when horses were conscripted and sent to the Western Front. In World War II, the effectiveness of the elephant was amplified in the dense jungles and mountainous regions of Burma and India. James Howard Williams' Elephant Company, which at its peak numbered 1,600 elephants, performed tasks that were critical to the Allied effort. These included building bridges, creating emergency airfields by clearing trees, and transporting refugees and weapons across unforgiving mountain terrain. The harrowing story of Bandula leading the entire Elephant Company up a 270-foot sheer cliff face after steps were literally sawed into the sandstone highlights the extreme extent to which their strength and trust were utilized to achieve seemingly impossible logistical goals. Strategic context and replacement of mechanization.
The need for these animals highlights the limitations of 20th century technology in specific geographical theaters. In World War I, military vehicles were not yet produced for mass deployment, ensuring the continued need for animal transport. This necessity led to the recruitment of zoo and circus elephants to fill labor shortages. Even in World War II, where mechanization was widespread, the environment often dictated a return to older forms of transport. The success of camels on the Eastern Front, particularly around Stalingrad, demonstrates that where infrastructure was poor and climate harsh, the camel remained the superior logistical tool compared to the truck or the horse. The elephant's operational effectiveness behind enemy lines, as demonstrated by Force 136 in Burma, further underscores this point. Their size and capability for movement in the dense jungle made them invaluable for clandestine operations, far surpassing the limitations of vehicles or planes in this environment. The sheer determination of Giles Mackrell to trek 100 miles through the jungle with his elephants to rescue 200 stranded soldiers and refugees at the Darfur River emphasizes that animal transport was at times the only possible solution for rescue and supply. The human-animal bond and morale. The sources also reveal the deep emotional aspect of this service. Animals were loyal, served without choice, and boosted morale. Examples of this bond and loyalty are found throughout the material. Old Douglas, the camel mascot of the 43rd Mississippi Infantry during the U.S. Civil War, exemplifies the morale-boosting role animals often played. However, the deepest connections are seen in the elephant handlers, particularly James Howard Williams. His dedication to elephants, which earned him the nickname the Elephant Whisperer, highlights the intense professional and personal relationships formed. The bond between Williams and Bandula was put to the ultimate test during the grueling 120-mile trek and the dangerous cliff ascent. The profound grief Williams experienced over Bandula's killing, which haunted him for life, illustrates the depth of this partnership. These relationships show that the animals were often treated as companions and essential partners, not just mere equipment. The gentle rearing of Bandula by Po Tok prior to his partnership with Williams underscores the recognition that kind treatment resulted in better, more trusting military animals.
The harsh reality and the need for better recognition. Despite their essential service, the animals faced horrific conditions and massive losses. The estimated death toll of over 100,000 camels in World War I due to combat, disease, neglect, exhaustion, and harsh conditions is a sobering statistic. The lack of reliable statistics for World War II casualties, coupled with the assumption that the count might equal or surpass the World War I numbers, reveals a gap in historical record-keeping regarding animal sacrifices. What can be improved? Based on the evidence presented in the sources, several areas related to the memory and documentation of animal service could be improved. 1. Comprehensive casualty recording. The lack of reliable statistics for World War II camel losses suggests that the sacrifices of these animals were not adequately tracked or preserved. Future historical analysis should aim to quantify these losses to fully represent their contribution and sacrifice. 2. Focus on specific theaters. While the history of horses is often discussed, the specific, unique logistical challenges overcome by specialized animals like camels in the steppes and deserts and elephants in the jungle mountains should be further prioritized in historical narratives. 3. Recognition of handlers and bonds. The stories of Williams, Mackerel, and the Mahats are critical. Recognizing the skills and dedication of the human partners, those who managed, trained, and saved these animals, is essential, as the effectiveness of the animals was directly tied to the skills of their handlers. The existing memorials, such as the one dedicated to the Imperial Camel Corps in London and the unique marker for Bandula on the Burma-India border, serve as powerful examples of the necessary recognition of their indispensable, loyal, and often tragic service. Conclusion. The involvement of animals in military conflicts is a theme rooted deeply in ancient history, stretching back millennia. By the time the world plunged into the two greatest wars of the 20th century, species like the camel and the elephant had already proven their enduring value. They were essential figures, drafted without choice or voice, yet they served loyally, transporting critical supplies, moving troops, saving lives, and sustaining morale. Camels, the ships of the desert, proved indispensable due to the remarkable biological adaptations. Their ability to sustain heavy loads, 600 pounds, over long distances, 60 miles per day, for weeks without water, made them the ultimate logistical tool in arid environments. This utility was evidenced by the formation of units like the British Imperial Camel Corps in World War I, patrolling the Sinai Desert.
Their versatility also extended to World War II's Eastern Front, where the Bactrian camel, Kuznechek, aided the Soviet defense of Stalingrad. Camels were vital for navigating the vast, waterless, Kalmyk steppes where trucks and horses faltered. Their service came at a tremendous cost, with estimates suggesting over 100,000 camels perished in World War I alone.
Elephants brought sheer strength and trainability to the conflicts. Historically used as a fearsome cavalry, in the World Wars they primarily served as powerful beasts of burden. In WWI, they filled essential labor gaps left by conscripted horses, working on farms and in cities. In WWII, their service was critical in the jungles of Asia. Stories like Giles Mackerel's rescue operation at the monsoon-swollen Dafa River, saving 200 refugees, and James Howard Billy Williams's 1,600-strong elephant company in Burma highlight their indispensable strategic role. Williams's elephant, Bandula, symbolized the profound partnership between man and animal, especially during the seemingly impossible ascent of the 270-foot cliff face during the retreat from the Japanese. The core idea remains that these animals were crucial logistical factors whose unique capabilities allowed military operations to proceed where contemporary technology failed. Their service ensured the flow of ammunition, food, and medical supplies, directly contributing to strategic outcomes. In summarizing their immense contribution, we must also recognize the cost. While memorials exist, the full scope of animal loss, particularly the unrecorded casualties of WWII, remains a challenging area for historical resolution. The stories of the camels and elephants in WWI and WWII are a vital reminder that global conflicts are fought and sustained not only by human soldiers, but also by the strength and loyalty of the animals drafted into the fight. Their sacrifice warrants enduring remembrance.